ɛnyɛ force sɛ kyinkyin a payment ne nyinaa no only amount in the when you cry yeah I'll you go then that Sunday come back when that is something no then it's
Okay, so who is reading for us? Someone should volunteer and read for us quickly. Who is reading? Caroline, read for us. Caroline Atta, please read for us.
So the direct material cost. Sir, please, I'm in the library.
You're in the library.
Yes,
No problem. So another person should read for us. Who is reading for us? Someone should just volunteer and read.
This Francis. Yes, I'm reading.
Yeah, Francis, read it a bit louder so everybody can hear your voice.
Standard and variance analysis. Able actually limited manufactures and sells a single product. The Sobolo.
Your voice is very low, Francis. Your voice is low. If you can do something about it, please do something about it. We can hardly hear you.
Sir, please, is it okay now?
You go ahead. Go ahead, please. Francis, can you hear me? Kwaku Prince, please read for us. Yeah, Kwaku Prince, you can read. Your hand is up. Read.
Able actually limited manufacturers.
I can hear you. Sir, I can hear you.
Yes, I'm reading.
Go ahead.
Able actually limited manufactures and sells a single product, the Sobolo. The table below is the standard scorecard for the manufacture and sale of a bottle of Sobolo. Direct material cost 4 kg at 1 cedi 50 pesos per bag. Direct labor cost 1 hour at 5 cedis per hour. Variable overhead cost 1 hour at 2 cedis 50 pesos. Fixed overhead cost 1 hour at 5 cedi 50 pesos per hour. Standard cost 19 cedis. Standard profit 11 cedis. Standard selling price 30 cedis. Budgeted volume of output for the second quarter of 2019 is 10,000 units. At the end of the scorecard quarter of 2019, direct materials consumption is 42,500 kg at a total cost of 68,500 cedis. Labor hours worked and paid for is 12,000 hours at a cost of 55,000 Ghana cedis. Variable overhead costs charged to product amount to 28,000. Fixed overhead costs incurred amount to 50,300 cedis. 12 hours, 12,000 sons are produced and sold. That's 12,000 sobolo are produced and sold for 290,500 Ghana cedis. Part, calculate the following variances. I, material quantity variance. I, material price variance. I, labor efficiency variance. Labor rate variance. Variable production overhead expenditure variance. And variable production overhead efficiency variance.
Thank you for the reading. Let's make a few changes to the question. I actually extracted this question from, a past question for one of the years. I think it's probably 2019 past question. So the year in the question.
Sir, please, I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
The year in the question is a little bit older. So let's change the year from 2019 to 2024. And then the last statement before the requirements, 12,000 sobolos. The products we are using there is called sobolo. So change that name, sans to sobolo. So you can make it 12,000 bottles of sobolo. That's okay. Let's make these changes. And then you have about between 1 and 2 minutes. Everybody should read it. Try to get personal, familiarize yourself with the question. And then after 2 minutes, we solve it together. If you are not talking, contributing to the class, your microphone should be off, please. So we don't get interference from your background. Put your microphone off if you are not given the opportunity to talk in the class. Okay, so I think we can start together. Let me give a brief overview of standard costing and then variance analysis. As a cost control measure, it's always a good thing to have standards, more specifically cost standards. And from the previous lecture I had with you, it was not a recorded lecture anyway, we emphasized that when you extract standards, and you can get the standards even from your previous undertakings, from your own previous undertakings, you can learn that, oh, for this piece of work, it has to take around these hours. It has to use around this quantity of materials. Even when you are not being strictly scientific, over years of doing the same thing, your mind can extract some standards for you. It's natural. But in business, we get it even more stricter. You're supposed to sit down, use a lot of scientific methods, there is something they call motion studies. For example, if you want to determine, how many hours it will require labor to produce this kind of product, given the product dimensions, given what the labor will have to do in order to get the product created, motion studies can be applied plus some other things, and we can determine the hours required to produce that product. And usually this kind of exercise applies to where we do standard products. So all the products are the same, like let's say board markers. A particular board marker will be of the same size, the same standards. Or let's say the tables you are sitting on in the classroom, they are of the same dimensions. Most products are like that. This kind of exercise is more fitting for such environments. So we are able to say, okay, for this particular product, this is the quantity of materials, 4 kilograms, that should go into 1 unit of the product. I just want to use some product as an example. So let's say the chairs you sit on. We are just assuming that the whole of the chair uses one material. That is oversimplification anyway, but that helps us to understand the concept. And if the product uses, let's say, types of material, 3 types of materials, you just use the same principles for each kind of material. Yeah, so the number of materials don't affect the analysis in any way. So let's say the table uses only wood. So one table uses 4 kilograms of wood. And 1 kilogram of wood, we buy it at 1.50 pesos. So if you have one table in the classroom, that one table, the cost of production, the material cost of production that goes into that one table is 6 cedis, which is made up of 4 kilograms of material at 1.50 pesos. This is basic mathematics. I think everybody shouldn't have a problem with it. But if you do have a problem with it, please let me know the calculation. So we are kind of breaking the cost of the table into its constituent parts: material part, labor part, overhead parts.
How am I going to the question? I'll just take a picture.
So that is the meaning of what we have here in the first line. Direct material costs. The direct materials that go into one table is 4 kilograms of wood. 1 kilogram costs 1.50 pesos. So material costs of the table is 6 cedis. Let's come to labor. One table takes 1 hour to complete. That's the meaning of this thing. Sorry. This one. One table requires 1 hour to do, and each hour costs us 5 cedis. In other words, we pay that labor 5 cedis for every hour, which means one table will cost us 5 cedis in terms of labor. So now we have material costs, we have labor costs for one table. We are adding them up. 6 plus 5 will be 11. And then there are indirect costs which are associated with the work we are doing. Variable overheads. One table, of course, the variable overheads are very much connected with the labor costs, and I'll explain why. It comes from this tradition where we have the belief that this traditional absorption costing concept. that, overhead costs is probably more driven by labor activities. So it's like when labor worked this 1 hour. When labor worked this 1 hour, as you are seeing on the screen, this 1 hour, he generated his own costs. That's the money we paid to him. That's the direct cost, 5 cedis for every 1 hour. But as he was working, he was also driving some other costs, some indirect costs, which is tied to, so every hour he works, he generates some indirect costs, and the rate is 2.5 cedis per hour. So every hour labor works, he generates additional costs, which means that the full labor cost, for lack of better word, let me use that word, the full cost that we pay to labor, or that labor generates for working on the table, is this 5 cedis plus 2 cedis 50 pesos. The 2 cedis 50 pesos per hour is the overhead part, but it's variable because it is linked with the hours. If the hours go up, it goes up. Hours comes down, it comes down. So that's the variable overheads. 1 hour of labor work generates 2 cedis 50 pesos indirect overheads. So that sets 2 cedis 50 pesos is here. When you add it to the 11 cedis, we get 13.5. Then we have fixed overhead costs. That one too, it is coming from the traditional absorption cost and thinking of overhead being generated from labor activities or labor hours. So this 1 hour that labor worked, he also indirectly generated this fixed overheads at the rate of 5 cedis 50 pesos. So these are the 1, 2, 3, 4 constituents of the product cost: material, labor, variable overheads, fixed overheads. When we put all of them together, 6 plus 5 plus 2.5 plus 5.5, it should be equal to 11. So here, it will be a formula. So I'll do is equal to sum of this range, and that should be 90. Yeah, so that's the standard cost. Standard cost because these are things we have sat down, we have considered so many factors, and we think that one product should cost us 19 cedis to produce. And the cost comes from material, 6 cedis from material, 5 cedis from labor, 2 cedis 50 pesos from variable overheads, and 5 cedis 50 pesos from fixed overheads. So we know that, okay, if everything goes according to standard, if there are not maybe some efficiency on our part, if we are not wasteful enough, we should do the product at this cost. Then for every single table, this is the profit we are loading on it. We want to earn 11 cedis on every table. So when we add this 11 cedis to the cost, then we have to sell it at 30. So this 30 is also a formula which can be generated as equal to this one plus this one. Or you still can use sum of the two. I think the sum is better. 30. So that's the meaning of, this is called standard cost sheets. Standard cost sheets. And in our time, you'll be preparing the standard cost sheets using spreadsheets. That's why I just want to demonstrate this exercise using the spreadsheet straight away. Any questions about the standard cost sheets? Any questions about the standard cost sheet, please? Okay, no questions. So let's go to the other part of the question. Question says, budgeted or standard volume of output for the second quarter of 2024. So let's say for budgeting purposes, we have determined these standards for the budget for the second quarter of 2024. Second quarter of 2024 will be from April, May, June. So it will be from April to June. So that's where we derive these standards for. And for that particular quarter, from April, May to June, we expect, so the standard is an expectation. The standard is what we believe will be the case. The standard is the budget. So budgeted volume of output for the second quarter was 10,000 units. And then we have these unit level standards for material, price, quantity, labor hours, labor rates, variable production overhead, fixed production overhead standards. So with the standard volume together with these standard dimensions, you can calculate your standard profit statement to see, okay, if everything goes according to the standard, this is how the business will do. So your first assignment on this is that using the standard data. So this is the standard unit costs for each of the cost elements, material, labor, overheads. And then we have the standard volume or the budgeted volume. You are supposed to prepare the standard income statement or the budgeted income statement. It's just a practice exercise. I'm not going to take it for marking. We are not going to score it. If you do it, it will help you. Then we have data for what actually happened during the second quarter of 2024. So the table you see at the top, and then that statement just below the table is telling you what we sat down to derive as the standard, as the expectation, as the benchmark, as the yardstick. But yes, that's what we did. We so much believe in it. We were professional in our judgment in determining these standards. But when second quarter of 2024 was actually in session, at the end of that period, these are the figures we recorded. So let me repeat that part of the question. At the end of the second quarter of 2024, direct materials consumption is 42,500 kilograms at a total cost of 68,500 Ghana cedis. Labor hours worked and paid for is 12,000 hours at a cost of 55,000 Ghana cedis. Variable overhead costs charged to products amount to 28,000. Fixed overhead costs incurred amount to 50,300. And then 12,000 bottles of Sobolo were actually produced instead of the standard, which was 10,000. So there was overproduction of the bottles of Sobolo by 2,000. And that 12,000 was produced at a total cost of 290,500. Yeah, so that's the question. And then we are required to do these calculations. to determine these things as they happen in that company. What was second quarter of 2024 is already passed. So let's say we are doing some assessment of that period. We had the standard set for that period, and we have collected the actuals that happened in that period. So the question based on this data is, what was the material quantity variance? And by now everybody understand what variance is. Variance is just English. It's the same meaning as the English word. Variance is the difference between what we set as the standard and what actually happened. And the variance can be a good one or it can be a bad one. It can be a favorable one or it can be adverse or unfavorable. So that's the exercise we are doing. It's quite a common sense exercise. There is no technicality with this. So just lower your mind. Don't think so much. We are not doing space science. It's just the everyday things we do in our lives. So now we want to calculate material quantity variance. This is what it means. The materials that we used. We set standards. So this is the material. We said each of the units of the sobolo that or each bottle of sobolo that we will produce, it should use 4 kilograms of the material. So the 12,000 that we actually produced, each one of them should have used 4 kilograms. So the standard material quantity for the actual output we did should be at 12,000 times 4. Yeah, so that is the standard material quantity we should have used, because each unit, each sobolo bottle, or each bottle of sobolo should have used 4 kilograms. So if you do 4 kilograms times the 12,000, so let me start solving them here. We are now doing materials, or let's say material. This one is a single material. Material quantity or usage. Quantity variance. So what we are saying is that let me try to capture it in narratives, right? So that it will help you to understand this as a common sense thing. It's not really formula work. You can generate every formula you will see in any textbook if you do understand it from this perspective. The formulas are generated from this understanding. So let's do it that way. The 12,000 actual sobolo. Don't worry about the English. I'll try to shortcut some. The 12,000 units. Units of actual sobolo. That's what we actually produced. It should have used it should use 12,000 times 4. Yeah, so this is the narrative. Just see it. If you have a problem, let me know. The 12,000 units of sobolo should, let me correct the mistakes, the typing mistake. It should have used 12,000 times 4 because each unit, the standard material quantity is 4. So this should have been, so let me do it equals I don't have any reference cells, so I'm going to type them direct. 12,000 times 4. Okay, so this is how many kilograms of material that we should have used. This is the total quantity of materials which we should have used for the 12,000 bottles of Sobol. But we actually used, and what we use is in the question. If you go to that part of the question which has the actual data, it says at the end of the second quarter of 2024, direct materials consumption is 42,500. So we use 42,500. Those who are disturbing, giving us feedback from their background. If I find you again, I will just remove you totally from the class. Okay, let's continue. So that is how we find the variance in the material quantity. The 12,000 units of Sobolo bottles, each one should have used 4 kilograms. So this is the total material we should have used, 48,000. But we used 42,500. So what do you see? Have we done well or we have done bad? Is it a favorable variance or it is unfavorable variance? It's a question. You can unmute yourself and participate. Favorable or unfavorable?
It's a favorable variance.
Yeah, favorable, because instead of using 48,000 kilograms of the material, we were able to use less for the same quantity. By standard, we should have used 48,000, but we managed to use less quantity of the material for the same output of 12,000. That is favorable. It is favorable by how much? So it's equal to, let's say, whether you will do this one minus this one or this minus this is not really the point. The point is how you interpret it. So it's equal to this minus this, that is the variance. So the variance is 5,500 kilograms. 5,500 kilograms. So this is how much less materials we use. In other words, how much materials, how much kilograms of materials, whatever, that we're able to save. Instead of using 48,000, I've used 42,500. We have been able to save 5,500 kilograms. This is what you will call the materials or material quantity variance in units.
Hello,
Here
sir,
the
please,
unit
I
is
have a question.
kilograms. So in kilograms. But we also want to know the cost implication. Well, we have been able to save 5,500 kilograms of materials. How will that translate in money? In other words, how much money were we able to save by being more efficient in our material usage. So to do that, we multiply this by the standard costs per material, which is 1.5 kilogram. Try to get an idea of how much money we have saved by being efficient, by saving 5,500 kilograms. So multiply by, oh no, so let me just say material quantity variance here is Ghana cedi. And we do that, okay, so let me add a line. Your presentation style can change. So I'm just adding here standard costs, standard material costs. You can leave it like this, but it is per unit, so you can be more specific. Per unit. And that is 1 cedi 50 pesos. Let's get back to the question and confirm. Yes, 1 cedi 50 pesos. So when I multiply the quantity of materials we saved by the standard cost per unit of the material, that gives me an idea of the material that we have saved in terms of money. This one is giving us the materials we have saved, which is the material usage variance or quantity variance in kilograms. When I multiply this by this, by the standard price, this gives me an idea of the money we have saved from materials. So this is the material quantity variance in Ghana cedis. Usually, this is what you'll be required to compute, but you'll have to go through this process. Get a variance in units, scale it at a price, which is the standard price. So we have an idea of the variance in terms of money. Any questions about the materials quantity variance? Okay, so let's go
Sir,
ahead.
please, I do have a question, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Sir, please, you see, with the standard quantity which was supposed to be produced, there was 10,000 up there.
People are making noise. Oh,
Please go ahead.
Please, can I go on?
Yes.
Yeah, so with the budgeted, the standard volume of the output which should be produced at the second quarter of the year 2019, which is 10,000 units. I thought that would be our standard quantity.
We have so many quantities. Which quantity are you talking about?
So you
It
see below
depends
the
on what
table.
you are doing, which will require you to use a certain figure. So for the exercise of computing the material quantity variance, this is the quantity you have to use, the 12,000, this one.
So means that 10,000 units is not raw materials.
It can be raw materials, it can be anything, but the fact that it is raw materials or not is not the point. It's about, for what we are doing, is that the figure we need? I want to know that, okay, I have a standard for material quantity. So every whatever the quantity of the finished goods. So let's go back to our tables
Please,
in the classroom.
can I say something? So you know why I'm asking that question? Because the 10,000 as the standard quantity, you can multiply it by the 4 kg to get the materials which were used as the budgeted volume of output or budgeted volume of the materials.
Okay,
which
so
will give you like 4,000 materials or 4,000 kgs.
So come up with your figure
40,000.
again. 10,000 times 10,000 times
10,000
times 4.
4.
What would that give
4
you?
kg, yes, please.
What is that supposed to give you?
40,000 kgs.
Yes, I know it's
So it will give you
40,000, but
40,000
what
kgs.
is that trying to do for calculate for you? What would that be
So it will
calculating?
calculate
What
the number
information
of
would that be giving you?
materials. The number of materials you need in total. Since you produced the budgeted materials or the budgeted unit was 10,000, each unit will need 4 materials. So the 4 materials and the 10,000 budgeted unit will give you the standard quantity which you are supposed to produce for the raw
Okay,
materials.
so I get your concern, but come and
Yes,
read the
please.
last item before the requirement.
Yes, I've seen the last item, but say it's contradictory. Like it's
What is the contradiction about it? I need to understand exactly what your problem is. Otherwise, because there's nothing wrong with what we have done. You don't understand something. So let's understand your
okay. So
concerns
you
well.
see, yes, you see in the first video you sent us to watch, the video of the 44-minute video of the Indian guy you said
Yeah.
yes, you can see that there's a little variation. There's a little variation inside what you are doing and what he did because the quantity multiplied it by the
There is no difference. Maybe you need to go back and watch the video again. He might have probably used a different approach, but it will come back to the same thing. So let me clarify your problem for you.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Your problem is this. When we are trying to find whether there was a difference in the actual quantity of materials and the standard quantity of materials. The point of concentration is on the quantities themselves. So let me restate it. We have actually produced 12,000. That's what the question said. The 10,000 was a standard, was a budget. That is what our dreams were. But that is not what happened. But what actually happened, the 12,000 that we actually produced, each one of them, we should have used 4 kilograms. We are trying to gauge if we used the standard kilogram in each production or we used more than the 4. Did we use 4 or we use more than 4 or less than 4? That's the question we are trying to answer. The focus is not between the standard unit you produced and the actual unit you produced. The focus is on, did you use more than the standard material or less or equal? So the actual finished goods that we produce, which is 12,000 Sobolo bottles. Each Sobolo bottle, if we didn't deviate from the material standard, each Sobolo bottle should have used 4 kilograms of the material. So the 12,000 that we actually produced, each one of them should have used 4 kilograms here. We did not produce the 10,000. So when you do 10,000 times 4,000, you are saying that we actually produced 10,000. But the question is telling you we produced 12,000 in the period, even though the budget was 10,000. It means we overproduced the budget. So whatever quantity that we produced, each unit should have used 4 kilograms. So this is the standard quantity of materials that should have used for the actual quantity of finished goods. And then the question tells you that, so let me read that part. Direct material consumption is 42,500 kilograms. That is what we actually used. And that is what we have put here. And that for 42,800 kilograms was purchased at a total cost of 68,500. So that 68,500 will also help us to find if there was a variation in this place, this 1.5. This 1.5. It also means that for each of these 4 kilograms, we have to buy each one at 1 cedi 50 pesos. So maybe you want to find out whether there was a variation in the price that we purchased it. So when we get there, when we are calculating the material price variance, we will also look at that part. So this is correct for gauging the materials usage or quantity variance. The quantity of material that we should have used versus what we actually used. That's what the materials quantity variance measures. Quantity
Sir,
of
please, sorry to
materials
ask.
we
Can
should
I
have
ask
used.
something?
So for the 12,000 units that we actually produced, the standard material quantity is 12,000 times 4. But we used 42,500, which gives us this variance. Okay. So that is it. Let's look at materials price variance. When you go home, watch your video well. Okay, so with the materials price variance, let's try to understand it naturally. See, at this point, don't try to think so much formula. I'm trying to make you understand what the rationale is behind every formula you can see. So when we are doing the materials price variance, this is the simple logic. You have some materials you have bought, some quantity of materials you have bought, actually. So if you get to the question, Alfred, follow and remove all those who have their microphones on and feeding us with background. Remove them totally from the class. Don't put them in the waiting room. So I think I should make you. Are you part of the class?
Yes, and 160 pesos.
Akiva, I'm here. You're not going again. Where's your bag? It's my
Yes, I'm back.
I didn't see the time they sent. Hey, please check.
Okay, so let's continue. So with the materials price variance, this is what we want to measure. For every quantity of materials that we have actually bought, the price at which we actually bought it versus the price that we should have bought it. That's the analysis we are trying to do. We have some materials that we have actually bought, some quantity. Each one of them, we should have bought them at 1 cedi 50 pesos. If we had bought each one at 1 cedi 50 pesos, then the quantity of materials we have bought multiplied by this 1 cedi 50 pesos will give us the standard material price for the actual quantity we have purchased. Then we compare that one with the actual price that we paid. Did we pay more than what we should have paid if we should go by standard, or less, or same? Then that helps us to analyze the type of variance we are in. So you can type something like the actual 4,000, the actual 42,500 kilograms of material should each let me do the English well. So each should have cost 1 cedi 50 pesos. So this is the narration. The actual 4,000, 42,000, yes, it's 42,500, not 550. So the actual quantity of materials, 42,500 kilograms. We should have bought each one at 1 cedi 50 pesos. In that case, we would have respected, or we would have met the standard material price. We would have adhered to the standard in terms of the material costs or material price. And that's what we want to gauge. Did we buy all the materials we bought at the standard price? The first one, what we're trying to do is that, did we use 4 kilograms for all of the 12,000 bottles that we produced? So all of the 12,000 bottles, if we had used the standard quantity, we would have used 48,000 kilograms. But the question is telling you, you actually used 42,500. So that's why the guy who was asking the question, this is the meaning. So go back and watch your video again. If your video is right, it should coincide with this interpretation. This one, the materials price variance. We want to see whether the price at which we should have bought each quantity or each kilogram of material, we were able to adhere to the standard. So if we were able to adhere to the standards, then the actual kilograms of materials, each one of them should have been purchased at 1 cedi 50 pesos. And that would have given us 4,500 times 1.5. That would have given us the 63750. If we had purchased each of the materials we used at the standard price of material of 1 cedi 50 pesos, then we should have incurred these costs. But in the question, we have to go and trace the material cost that we actually incurred. So the same line, direct material consumption, that is the actual quantity, 42,500. This total was paid for at 68,500. Let me put it here, I'll give the narration later. 68,500. So this is telling you that there is a difference, because if this actual 42,500, if we had paid for each one of them at the standard material price or cost of 1 cedi 50 pesos, then the actual costs for the total material should have been 63750. The moment it is not so, it means there is a variance in the price. It means either we bought it below the 1 cedi 50 pesos per kilogram, or we bought it higher. And it depends on what the variance is, what the direction is. So let me give a narration for this one. This one you can simply say, but total material costs you can make it more specific. Actually incurred. I think I need to add this one for learning purposes. Actually incurred. Either you use was or is, it doesn't matter. What's this? You can also calculate the difference at the purchase price per unit level. Okay, one should have been paid for at once in the 50 pesos. That is the standard. When you do 68,500 divided by, so let me do that one here. This one, sorry. This one divided by 4,500 is telling you 1.61. So this is what we actually, on the average, this is how much we paid for each one of them. Instead of this. This is common sense, so don't think too mathematical. And your mathematics should coincide with the common sense that is supposed to explain. Standard-wise, each unit of this 4,500, this is the material that we actually used. If we had obeyed the standard price for each kilogram, then this total kilograms of 4,500, the total cost should have been 63,750, which is 42,500 total materials actually used times the standard price for each one. So that's what we have calculated. And then the question is giving us what's the total material costs actually was. It is this. So just by comparing this and this, you see there's a variance. So you can extract the variance from here. Or you can probably, okay, I have standard cost for one. Let me go and calculate the actual cost for one. You can also do it that way. Standard cost for one, actual cost for one is this. That readily tells you, okay, we paid above the standard. And that's why you are also seeing that what we actually paid is more than what we should have paid if we had paid the standard. Great. So the standard, the variance is, well, it doesn't matter. Maybe you want, I don't want to show negative numbers. So I want to do the bigger number minus this. Whether you do this, the first one minus second one, or the second one minus first one, doesn't really matter. It is the interpretation. So here, I didn't even add the interpretation. This is favorable. So this is how we normally do it. We add capital F. We attach capital F to it, meaning, okay, 8,250 Ghana cedis, favorable variance. And here, it will be, so let me say materials, material price variance in Ghana cedis, and you have to check where it is Ghana cedis and where it is it is units. Questions will be strict in testing that thing. If you get it wrong, it is wrong. So this is the material price variance. In total terms. In per unit, this is it. If you subtract, this is what we actually paid minus the standard. Oh, I don't have the standard in a single cell. So let me take it from here. That will be this minus 1.5 or 50, doesn't matter. Okay, so this is the variance, 0.11. This is how much we overpaid the actual, so this is how much we overpaid the price or the cost of the material. This is the extra costs that maybe prices are not stable. So this is the increment in prices, let me put it that way, that resulted. If you multiply this one, this, by the 42500, it should take you to the same place. This and this are the same. And this is what we are trying to analyze. It is common sense. It's not really a formula, but later you can generate the formulas based on the common sense. Any questions about materials price variance?
Yes, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, sir, please. So using the other approach, you see, when you find for the price of the material per unit, or the price of the material, yes, per unit, that's 1.61. That's the actual price that they paid for the unit of the material, which is 1.61, minus the standard price, which was to be paid per unit of the material, which is 1.50. When you multiply the 1.61, after subtracting, then you multiply by your standard, by your actual quantity, you get 68425. Hello.
Yeah, I'm listening. Are you, is
Yeah.
it a question or you are adding some comments to what you have said?
Yeah, sir, please pay the other video, the first one you sent to us. That was how they calculated it.
I don't think so. See, so okay, this is what I can advise you to do.
Okay.
Listen to the logic I am trying to make you understand.
Okay.
If you have your mind on the video, then there's no need to listen to this logic. Listen to the logic, unless you want to say that, okay, there's no logic in what I've explained to you. Listen to the logic here. Go back
Okay.
and watch your video again. I'm sure you are getting some things twisted. This is what I've said. You have used this quantity of materials. This is common sense. Don't take your mind anywhere. Take your mind off any video you have watched.
Okay, sir.
If you didn't understand the video, it means that video should kind of sit on your mind also not to understand this one. So take your video somewhere. And I'm sure you didn't
Okay.
understand the video. That's not what the video will say. There are different approaches to solving this. So maybe you didn't get the approach he was using. Take your mind off it. We are discussing common sense. Try and get a common sense. If you have a problem about the common sense of what we are speaking, you can ask questions on it. Don't take us back to a video. I'm not teaching based on that video. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this is what we are saying. You have used 42,500 kilograms of materials. If you had obeyed the standard purchasing price, then each of these 42,500 kilograms, you should have paid 150 pesos for each one. So this is how you do it. The 42,500 actual kilograms of material used. If now our concentration is on the standard price, was there a difference in the standard price? So the materials is the actual one you have used. Is the actual one. So this the usage, the quantity of the materials is put on hold at the actual, because we are trying to see if there's a difference between what we have actually done and what we thought we will do. So this is what we have done. This is the actual materials we have used. How much, what was the price we paid for each one of them? That one, maybe you can discuss it that way. This is the actual material quantity we have used. Did we pay each of this 42,500 at 1 cedi 50 pesos? Then you can come down and calculate what we actually paid for. And when you do, you will get this 1 cedi 61 pesos. Oh, okay, then you say, okay, instead of paying 1 cedi 50 pesos for each of the 42,500, which would have given us this one, we actually paid 1 cedi 61 pesos. And when you do that, it will give you this one. If you want to confirm it, let me do it here. This one here is equal to 1.61 times, let me reference the 42,500 here, see. It will give you this same 68,500. If you don't understand this common sense and you still want to refer yourself to the video, then I don't know what you want to do. This is what we're trying to do. We are not trying to do the video. We are trying to understand this problem. All right, so bring your mind here and take it off the video. Are you okay?
Yeah, I think the multiplication that didn't go or like using my phone's calculator, that was right.
Yeah, so
How
take
come I
your
didn't
time
get it?
and focus on what we are doing. Later, you can do the calculations to compare.
Okay, sir.
If
All
you
right,
do
thank
have further problems, you can ask further questions.
you. Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
So this is the materials price variance. This one, is it favorable or unfavorable?
It's favorable.
Confirmed, who is confirming or rejecting?
Unfavorable.
Someone says favorable, another person says unfavorable. Give your explanations.
Yeah, the actual was 68,500, but the standard was rather low. That's 63,750.
But
So it was
let me
unfavorable.
caution. Being favorable or unfavorable is not really a matter of actual and standard. It's a matter of the nature of the costs item. For example, this is material price. If you pay more for material, it is a bad thing for you as a company. That is how you have to analyze it. If you pay more for a material, it is a bad thing. So we should have paid 1 cedi 50 pesos, which is in total 63,750. But actually, did we pay more or less? Actually, we paid more. That makes it bad, unfavorable. Another term is for unfavorable is adverse. So unfavorable, capital U, adverse, capital A. That's it. Now let's move ahead to labor. So we are done with materials. Okay, let me also talk about another variance that you might be asked sometimes, which is the total materials, total variance. Some also say total material variance. I don't know where the total should be, but it doesn't matter. So materials or material total variance. That one is looking at the variance calculation. You see the product, if you look at the product, Sobolo bottle, it's like we have divided the product into 4. And each section represents a type of cost. The first section is material costs. And it is, that portion is 6. So maybe it's like we are kind of dividing the bottle, the Sobolo bottle, according to the size of the cost. So material will get 6. So you have to measure 6 and mark it. And then direct labor has 5. Variable overhead cost 2.5, variable fixed overhead cost 5.5. So that's how the bottle is divided into 4 sections. We can calculate the material cost section. So that one, we are not going to do the constituent of the material cost. What we have done so far is focusing on each constituent of the material cost, which is 6. The constituents are 4 and 1.5. When you multiply 4 by 1.5, you get 6. So, in effect, when you add the variance calculated from the 4, which is the quantity variance, to the variance calculated from the 1.5, which is the price variance, it should give you the total variance, which is the variance you calculate at this 6. That's the connection. So before we even do the total variance, we can calculate the total variance by summing these two. And then when we finish, we'll do it direct using the 6. And it should coincide. Otherwise, there's a problem somewhere we have to go and resolve. So total variance for the first approach, let's do it. Sum of quantity and price variance or variances. Okay, so in that case, it is going to be equal to, but one is adverse and one is favorable. So when you are summing them, you have to sum them with the correct operational signs. The favorable one is positive, so I'll do this. And the unfavorable is negative, so that should be minus this. And that is the total variance, 3,500. If we have to calculate it straight away, we will have to say that, okay, the 12,000 bottles of Sobolo each should cost, or let's say should have cost. It depends on how you want to write it. Should have costs, or if you say costed, that is also not bad. Should have costs, and here into brackets 12,000 times 6, which is, sorry, I didn't bring equal to. So equal to, let me check the formula again. Yeah, 12,000 times 6. So if we had produced each bottle of Sobolo at the standard costs of material, which is 6, this is the costs that each bottle of Sobolo should have been produced, 6, and therefore 72,000 in total. But the question told us that the 12,000 bottles of Sobolo are produced let's make a little bit of a correction on this one. It's not any serious connection, just the English can be a little bit ambiguous. 12,000 Sobolos are produced and sold for 290,500. So it's confusing because it's combining two values. Is it the sales value, is the sales revenue, or the cost of producing it? So it's the cost. So if you like, cancel the sales. So let's make it 12,000 bottles of Sobolo are produced at 290, 500. I think there will be something wrong somewhere. Let me check. So I think the figure there refers to the sales, not the cost. So let's keep it as it is. 12,000 Sobolos are produced and sold for, let's maintain the original, produced and sold. So it is for the selling price. The question is silent as I see it now, is silent about the cost at which we produced the 12,000, which in this case, so let's suspend that part of the question. I think there's a missing value. We need information on the costs at which the 12,000 was produced. It seems like the 290 there refers to the sales revenue meant for other purposes because the figures don't make sense. Yeah, so this 290 there is not the cost of producing the 12,000. It's not the material cost of producing the 12,000. So let's look for the material costs. Okay, the material cost is there. It's at the first or the second line where we have the actual figures. Yeah. So the 12,000 bottles of Sobolo, if we produce each one at the standard cost of 6, that's what we have already explained. That is 72,000. So that is how much it should have cost us in terms of only material costs. But the material cost that we actually paid, if you read line 2, direct material consumption 42,500 at a total cost of 68,500. Yeah, so that's what we were looking for. So total material costs for the 12,000 bottles was question 68,500. 68,500. Yeah. Okay, so this is the right thing. So all the 12 bottles that we produce, material cost inside each one of them is 6 cedis. So if we had been able to do our work at the standard material cost of 6, this is the total material cost that we should have generated. But the material cost that we actually paid to our suppliers was the second figure. So when we subtract then we get the same 3,500 as I explained earlier. Yeah. So this is the material total variance or total material variance, whatever, wherever the total should be, doesn't matter. This is how you calculate it. You can calculate it by summing the material quantity and price variances or calculating it direct as I have done. Any questions about the materials total
Hello.
variance? Yes, please.
Yeah, so I was also suggesting, you see, the 1.61 we had, we could have multiplied it by the 4 kilograms.
So
Then you
do it that
multiply
way. So there
by
are
the
many ways
actual.
of doing it. So do it that way,
Yes,
okay?
sir. Okay,
That's it.
sir.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Then let's go to labor variances. You just need to make sure the logic is not broken. As for the formula part of it, it's not really the point because this all the calculations we are doing are largely like basic mathematics. So you can have some other way of still extracting it, but the logic should be there. That's why I am explaining the logic behind the approach I'm using. You are actually doing something. You set price which you wanted to meet, and there is a price you have actually paid. The logic of how you analyze this situation, whether you paid more or you paid the standard or you paid less, is what every calculation should maintain. The approach can be a bit different, but the logic doesn't differ. So whatever other approach you have, that's the baseline. It should maintain the same logic. We are not just learning formula, we are learning the logic of doing something to gain information for decision making. So the formula per se is not what we are learning. So labor variances, we have, if you go to the table, you can see labor is here. It's in two parts, hours and rate per hour, just like the material one. So here too, we calculate two variances and you can sum them to get the total variance. So the first variance, if you should go by the arrangement, will be the quantity of hours variance. But they have a special name for it. The quantity of hours variance, they refer to it as efficiency variance. But you have to get that underlying logic. You are calculating the difference in the hours which should have been used and the hours which were actually used. That's the logic. The formula, the manipulation, how someone will go about it is not really the point. However, the approach is, are you measuring that logic? We are measuring the hours that we should have used for the work and the hours that we actually used. That's what we are measuring. If you look at this, it says 1 hour, 1 unit of the product, 1 Sobolo bottle. It uses 1 hour to produce. It's a fictitious example, so don't worry about whether we actually use 1 hour to do 1 bottle of Sobolo or not. So 1 bottle of Sobolo uses 1 hour. So in the period, we produce 12,000 Sobolo. So you can get the actual hours that we should have used for the actual Sobolo we produced. Yes, we did produce 12 bottles. We didn't produce 10,000 bottles. We produced 12,000 bottles. That 12,000 bottles, each bottle should have used 1 hour. In that case, we should have, the standard is that the 12 bottles should have used 12,000 hours. Sorry, the 12,000 bottles should have used 12,000 hours. But go to our books and let's see the actual hours that we have recorded. If it is the same, you don't do any calculation. If it is the same, it means that, okay, we used 1 hour for every bottle. If there's a difference, it means we didn't use the 1 hour. We might have used more or less, and you go and use. If you care, you can calculate it at that hour level. The hour for 1 bottle of Sobolo. The standard is 1 hour. The actual hours we used for 1 bottle of Sobolo, was it 1 hour? Like we did for the material price variance. We should have paid 150 pesos. But did we actually pay that? You can extract that information from the figures given you. We actually paid this for each of the materials we used. And that is how come you are able to compute this figure as the actual materials we use, 42,500, times what we actually paid, 68,500. That's the meaning. This is the logic you are going for. However, the video I shared with you approached this. It should be calculating this logic. So you go back to your video again. If the logic is the same, then maybe you are learning a different approach, which is fine. If it is not calculating this logic, then there's something wrong with how it is being calculated. All right, so we are going to do similarly. We calculate the quantity of, if you like, let's borrow from materials. Material quantity. So labor hours quantity, sort of. So let me even write it like that, just for the sake of tutorials. Labor hours quantity. Variance. And then I'm coming here. This is popularly referred to as labor hours quantity variance, popularly referred to as labor efficiency variance. You can shorten it as LEF. So it's like all the products that we have actually produced. Each one of them should have used a certain number of hours. So that's the standard hours. And you can also begin to use those terms because it's used in many other textbooks. So standard, total, and it's not a deviation from my first approach. It's the same thing. I'm just trying to, what is happening? Okay, so total, standard, labor hours. If you don't understand it, let me know. Total standard labor hours for the actual units, 12,000. For the 12,000 actual units. So let me put a calculation in bracket to guide us. But why? So this will be computed as 12,000 times 1, because 1 unit of the 12,000 units uses 1 hour. And this will give us 12,000 times 1, which is 12,000. Then we can narrate this one as total. Instead of standard, this will be actual. Total actual labor hours for the same 12,000 units. In the question, the total labor hours that we actually use, labor hours worked and paid for, is 12,000 hours at a cost of, so it's still 12,000. It means there's no variance. Yes. So there's a 0 variance in the labor efficiency variance. Labor was not able to use less time for the same output level, neither did they use more time. They just used the standard time. 12 hours, 12 hours. So if the question had said, oh, the actual labor hours for the 12,000 units was, let's say, 14,000. Then automatically you know that, oh, once there's a difference, then there's a variance. This is, you can calculate the variance in the totals from the total values. Or you might want to compute, okay, the standard hour was 1 hour. So if there's a difference in these two figures, it means that the actual hours for 1 unit of the product was different from the one. So you could have calculated it. In this case, it will be this 14,000 divided by 12,000. And that will be 1 hour, about 1.7 minutes or so. So 1.16667 hours. So if we had used more hours than the standard hours, this is what the meaning will be communicating. This is what the meaning will be. In this case, it is the same 12 hours that we actually used. The actual hours we used was not different from the standard hours. So when I change it, you see that the actual hour is 1, just like the standard hour. And therefore the variance is 0. So we can say, so this will be hours. Let me put a narrative here. So hours here to hours. Don't make those mistakes, hours. So the first line of variance calculation will be in hours as well. So labor efficiency variance will be this minus this. 0 hours. which means that the labor efficiency variance also in Ghana cedis will be 0, because when you multiply 0 by anything, it will give you 0. If it were not 0 here in hours, we would have multiplied these hours by the standard rates of labor time, which is 5, which is 5. But if we do multiply the 0 by 5, it is still 0. That's why we didn't go that step further. Any questions in the labor efficiency variance? Okay, let me just for tutorial sake, let me complete it, because I will probably share. I have to share the Excel file with you. So this is the standard rates per labor hour. We just want to convert the labor variance in hours to money. So let's say this is how much hours we were able to save. So let's say it was a favorable variance. How does it translate into money? Because the time is money. Each hour we saved is paid, we are assuming the standard will work, is paid at a certain standard rate. So we multiply it by that standard rate. That gives us an idea of how much money we have saved from saving that time, assuming if the variance was favorable. And the reverse, yeah, is also interpreted in that same fashion. So standard rate per labor hour is 5.5. In our case, let's go back to the question and confirm. Here, labor cost 1 hour at 5.8 is 5 at 5 cedis per hour. So it's not 5.5, it's 5 or 5.00, which is the same as 5. So the labor efficiency variance in Ghana cedis would be equal to this times this, which is still 0. So 0 Ghana cedis. We have saved nothing because we never actually did anything different than the standard. So this is labor efficiency variance. Now let's look at labor price variance, which is officially referred to as labor rates. So I just want you to see the mirror that it has with the same mirror that it shares with the materials. Materials quantity, labor hours quantity, materials price, labor price, but officially we say labor rates variance. They are the same. And it follows the same logic. So labor rates variance. The logic here is that labor hours, whatever it is that we have used, each hour should be paid at 5. We just want to make sure whether we pay the 5. Here, it is only the 5 we are gauging. Was there a difference in the 5 with what you actually did, which is the actual hours you have worked? Is there a difference in the 5? Did you pay the standard 5 or you paid less than 5 or more than 5? So you can say, you can put it in any narration that makes sense. You can say for the total hours of 12,000, total actual hours of 12,000, each hour should have been paid at 5, which you can also shorten that narrative to say standard standard labor costs. So it is your actual labor hours paid at the standard time. So let me narrate it so you don't get confused. The actual labor hours worked, in this case 12,000, should each be paid at 5 cedis. Okay, so that's the logic. This is what we are actually calculating. The actual hours we worked in the question, it is 12,000. We are measuring any difference in the rates that we paid. At this point, it's not the hours that we worked. The first one, we were measuring any difference in the hours that we actually worked. So when you go home, take your time and get the logic right. We are calculating the difference in the hours that we actually worked. So the 12,000 actual units of Sobolo bottles, each one should have used 1 hour. And what was the total hours we used for the same 12,000 bottles? We used the same hours. If it were different hours, that's how we strike out the difference in the hours, which is the hours variance, the quantity of hours variance, which is the efficiency variance. Here, we are saying that whatever amount of hours you have worked, each one should have been paid for at the standard rates. So the 12 hours we have actually worked should have been paid for at the standard rate, which would have given us 12,000 times 5, which is 60,000. Now we go back and look for how much price or the total. Sometimes I can give you the price for one, the actual price for one, or it will give you in total. Usually you will get them in total because the organization records things in total as opposed to recording at per unit level. So this is the natural way the question mostly will feature. You have the totals in your books. Okay, so we get the receipts. What is the total bill for labor that we actually paid? It can be on some voucher or somewhere. In the question, labor hours worked and paid for is 12,000 hours at a cost of 55,000. So that is 55 actual cost paid for labor. So you see that, oh, we have paid less, which means that we're able to probably negotiate and pay below the 5 cedis per hour. That could result from maybe resorting to some cheaper sources of labor. Nowadays that we have massive, what do we call it? Graduate unemployment. Employers are taking advantage of that. So maybe standard-wise, this is the rate, but there are a lot of people out there, they have nothing to do. When you even give him 10 cedis, he will take it. 5 cedis, somebody will even take it. So maybe they chanced on such an opportunity and they were able to pay less. They were able to pay less. That could be the reason. So you can say, but we actually paid I can even end the statement here. We actually paid this, which will give us a difference of this minus this, and it is 5,000. If you look at it, is it favorable or unfavorable, and why? It's a question, please. We should have paid 60,000 and we managed to pay 55,000. So this is a favorable variance. Favorable variance. We can calculate the total labor variance or labor total variance by summing the two. 0 plus a positive 1. So total labor variance is equal to this plus this, which is 5,000. If you calculate it directly, you will get the same thing. Okay, so this is 5. We produce 12,000 units of Sobolo bottles. Let me do it here. The other approach. So the 12,000 bottles of Sobolo should cost in terms of labor $12,000 times 5, which is 12,000 times 5, 60,000. But we paid how much did we pay for labor time? 55,000. And the difference is the 5,000 you see there. So that's how you calculate it from the total level. So this is labor efficiency variance, labor rate variance. Any questions, please? And it is a favorable variance. Any questions? Okay, so we'll break the lecture here. I think boredom is setting in. Then we will continue with labor efficiency variance. Oh, sorry, we have done that already. We will continue with variable production overhead expenditure variance, variable production overhead efficiency variance, and fixed production overhead variances as well when we meet the next time. So we are done with the session, but do you have questions generally for the session? If you have a question, I'm waiting. Let me look at the chat if there are questions here. Okay, no questions from someone. Hello, please. Hello, sir, please. The network is really bad. Yes, I know that. Apart from that, okay, no questions. Thank you for your attention. We will continue another time.
Bye.